The company TYR was named after the Norse god of war, treaties, justice, and good faith. Is that foreshadowing for what they plan to do in CrossFit? Welcome back to the channel. Now, if you didn't see people wearing TYR shoes at the CrossFit Games, well, then you must have had your eyes closed, as despite the fact that Noble was the title sponsor and giving people more shoes than they could possibly wear, and Reebok had their bonus program that meant athletes could win money if they wore their shoes, still 50% of the elite field were wearing TYR shoes. And that's not all that TYR are doing to make a splash in the world of CrossFit. Now, I wanted to know a little bit more about them, so I reached out. And I must say, as a company, they were incredibly accommodating. Their CEO, Matt DiLorenzo, put me in touch with Corey Berger, who is not just an OG CrossFitter himself, but he is their Director of Functional Fitness. And he was able to make time for me to have a call with him, so we sat down and I was able to ask all the questions that I had about TYR. Now, if after this video you still have questions you'd like answered about TYR, let me know in the comments because, well, now I know the people to ask. And I should say that it wasn't a sit-down one-on-one interview. It was a much more general chat about TYR, what they're doing. I was, of course, able to ask the questions I had, and Corey gave me answers to pretty much everything I asked, which was great. So I'm just going to kind of highlight now the main takeaways I had from this conversation. Now, if you knew anything about TYR before they entered the world of CrossFit, it's probably through swimming. And if you know anything about the history of the company, you'll know that it was quite a battle to position themselves where they have in the swimming world. So once again, we see that God of War persona coming through. But we're not here to talk about swimming, we want to focus on CrossFit. So for me, an obvious starting point in the conversation before I could talk about all the incredible things they were doing at the Games this year was why? Why this move into CrossFit? Well, it turns out it was changes in swim training that actually got them into CrossFit. And that's because any great swimmer knows it's not just what you do in the pool, but it's also the time you're spending in the gym on dry land. And what was it that a lot of the TYR athletes were doing to supplement their training? Well, probably you can guess, it was CrossFit. So in order to help their athletes do better in the gym, TYR saw a need. But this doesn't quite explain the number of athletes they've brought into their stable or their incredible presence at the Games. Well, to better understand why that's happening, we can go back again to TYR's origins with swimming. So the way it all started was having a professional swimmer team up with a designer to help come up with products that would be truly effective and useful for those at the top of the sport. And that's exactly the same approach they're taking with CrossFit. So when they get these athletes, it's not just about having their name associated with this big name athlete and it gets TYR's name out in the CrossFit world. It's that symbiosis of design and athlete that can give them the feedback so that they can actually make a product that they are truly happy with, both TYR and the athlete. And then we can look at all the athletes wearing them at the Games as the ultimate product test. Because if these shoes are working for these athletes at the CrossFit Games, is there anything that you or I could do at our local box that would be too much for these shoes? Now, of course, let's not pretend that marketing doesn't play a massive part here. Of course it does. In fact, if we saw the reels that were being put up of athletes receiving their shoes in these kind of cases, it was like something out of a James Bond movie. Definitely a clever marketing strategy from TYR. But what we may have thought was interesting was the choice of athletes. So when I spoke to Corey about this, the reasoning was that looking at the elite individual field, everyone that was there, well, they'd worked incredibly hard to get there, so they all deserved a reward or a well done from the company. And that meant TYR reached out to all of those athletes to offer them the opportunity to wear the shoes. They weren't just chasing the biggest, most well-known names. And that paid off for them in a huge way. Because not only did they have two pairs of their shoes on the podium with Ricky Garrard and Roman Krennikov both wearing TYR, but some of the most memorable moments from the CrossFit Games happened in their shoes. For example, this is one of the most memorable moments from the CrossFit Games. It might be one of the most memorable moments from all CrossFit Games. It's a picture that was shared around, obviously immediately after it happened, but since then it's been shared and used as an example of seeing the community rallying behind the athletes, the community coming together. It's an incredible picture, it's an incredible moment, and the shoes she's wearing, Well, they're TYR. So it's good for them that they'd reached out to all these different athletes, because it meant that having someone like Rebecca wearing their shoes, there they are, featured in this iconic moment of CrossFit history. Or what about someone like Nick Matthew? So Nick Matthew was a bubble athlete. He didn't qualify for the games. He didn't qualify through the last chance qualifiers. He then got in through a backfill. Yet he was reached out to by TYR. He was wearing their shoes. He won the skill speed medley, doing double under crossovers, a movement that some people weren't sure he was doing correctly. So what would they do? They would slow it down. They were focused, watching. Was the rope passing 2 times under his feet? What's on his feet? TYR trainers. And let's not forget, he also tied for first place in the sandbag ladder, which was another event that had an incredible amount of focus on it. It was such an epic event to watch, and getting a 2 first place tie with chip timers, that's incredible. Of course, he also tied with Guy Malheiros, who was also wearing TYR's shoes. But is that all it was? They just spam all these athletes, and the sheer numbers means, of course, you're going to get this happening. Well, something to think about is the validation it gives their product that so many athletes were willing to roll the dice on wearing a pair of shoes that they hadn't previously trained in. And we know that this can be a real issue for athletes, because we've seen it happen, particularly when Reebok was the title sponsor. We would hear complaints from athletes that, all year they're training and competing in different shoe, but now at the games they have to wear Reebok. So we understand that these games athletes take their footwear very seriously. Now, if you're interested in seeing what makes these trainers so special, well, the pre-order is open. You can go buy a pair in November. They'll be released. So get in on that if you want to understand why so many athletes decided to make that decision. Now, of course, it's not just about shoes, and it's not just about shorts and t-shirts and the other products that they're providing. But TYR have also made an impact in other ways within CrossFit. For example, last year they were the official eyewear sponsor of Wodapalooza, giving out thousands of pairs of sunglasses to athletes and volunteers alike. But this year they've upgraded. They are no longer the eyewear sponsor, they are now the title sponsor of Wodapalooza for 2023. And when I think about Wodapalooza, I don't just think of it as a CrossFit competition with a couple of events. We think of it as a community event. It is a fitness festival. So just think what TYR's presence there will mean. Last year, when they were the eyewear sponsor, they were able to run a number of pop-ups and workshops and events for the spectators. They were able to help the athletes with using the resources they had with the athletes they have, both in the CrossFit world and the swimming world, to help people with things like open water swimming. They also ran spectators through the row, run, swim event, where they were able to do it with the likes of CrossFit royalty Annie Forsdottir. So if that's the kind of thing they were able to do and achieve when they were just the eyewear sponsor, imagine what they've got in store next year as the title sponsor. Unfortunately, Corey wouldn't give me any details on what they've got planned, but he definitely seemed confident that it was going to be something special. If I'm not wrong, the next place where you'll be able to see them will be in Madrid. So if anyone is heading to Madrid for that event, make sure to track them down if you want to see what all the fuss is about. And through the course of the conversation, Corey also mentioned other things that TYR had been doing as a company within CrossFit, working with local boxes, helping them put on some smaller competitions that were charity events to help raise money for some good causes. So they are a part of the community. Now, we talk about companies like Noble that came up from within the community, and maybe you look at TYR as an outsider coming in, but we should remember that the people working for them, particularly within their arm of CrossFit, are part of the community. They've been in the community for a long time, they care about it, and TYR as a company felt that swimming and the community they had there has a lot of similarities to the CrossFit community. So they understand what it means to be a part of a community. So what do you think? Are you happy when you see brands and companies like TYR making a move in the CrossFit space, helping out the athletes and the community in general? What would you like to see from companies like this? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a future video.